Thank you for inviting me and coming to share some ideas about design technologies in relation to gambling. I think maybe some of the insights that I have probably merge quite well with what Giuseppe was talking about, but from a different perspective. If he was talking about behavioural science and computational algorithmic forms of knowledge, what I've got here is more of a case study, I guess, of the ways that design can be manipulated to make people behave or to persuade people to behave in particular types of ways. And gambling is a great little case study of looking at how that can be done. So to sort of give a little bit of background, I guess, my interest in the whole area of behavioural design comes from more of an interest in addiction, really, addictive types of behaviour, which in turn is something that's located in the wider political economy of neoliberalism. Particularly the ways that the system is designed, I think, to produce excessive forms of behaviour. So things that you would call, well, amongst other things, of course, amongst various types of products. So I guess one of the ways that it does this, one of the main ways that it does this, is through particular manifestations of technology and design and marketing, which come together in particular ways to produce appealing or effective types of products. And this is the whole point of capitalism. This is what consumer capitalism under neoliberalism is designed to do. That's the whole raison d'etre of it. And it does this by creating products that are irresistible, pleasurable, habit-forming, or in other discourses you could describe them as addictive, and particular discourses do talk about them that way. And the picture here of a recent book, well, it's more of a marketing guide, really, from an author called Nur Eyal. And the title is Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. So it's quite explicit there about the purpose of design and the ways that consumer industries can specifically create particular types of things that create these types of effects. A quote from Nur Eyal, and this is actually a quote from a Silicon Valley investor, and he said, "The world will get more addictive in the next 40 years than it did in the last 40. So it's a very explicit manifestation of the point of not just Silicon Valley investments, but consumer capitalism in general. And so what we're talking about here are products like services like Facebook and Google, devices like smartphones, tablets, games like Candy Crush and gambling games, foods, particular irresistible foods. These are all designed in particular ways through technology, design and marketing to be particularly appealing. And the gambling industry are absolute experts at this. They know this better than anyone, and they don't have any of the problems that Giuseppe pointed to, that the problems of low sample sizes or issues about opt-in and ethics. They have vast numbers of customers who are signed up with them, who they glean big data from in order to make their products more effective. So they are a fantastic test case of how this can work. And on top of that, they also use particular types of nudges and affordances in particular ways. So just to give an idea of how gambling is a good example of addictive product design, I think you've got three interlapping spheres here. Product design and ergonomics together with technology and also marketing, which intersect in particular ways, which are curated in particular ways to produce specific types of emotional and cognitive states. And these in turn drive repeated and increasing play in every case. These types of effects are particularly revealed through machines in the design of casinos and in mobile and social games, new forms of mobile and social games, and I'll have a look at those three areas in the next few minutes. And I think what you notice across each one is that although gambling games are designed by random number generators, the behavior that they produce in players is anything but random. It's not random at all. It is very much designed to produce a particular type of behavior, which is, in every case, this repeated play. So the first and the most, I guess the most illustrative example are machines. Now machines, slot machines, EGMs, fruit machines, whatever you want to call them, they are the most lucrative, aspect of the gambling industry. Between 75% and 80% of industry profits come from machines. Everything else is really just a stage show. Machines are what drive industry profits. And they're an example of what researchers have called addiction by design. They're produced in particular ways with a really quite sophisticated combination of behavioural psychology, behavioural economics, ergonomics, marketing, product features. All of these things come together to produce a very specific set of heuristics and cognitive biases and misperceptions and affective states. One of them is the illusion of control, which is the idea that you're actually in control of a game when you're not. So, I mean, all these games are random. There's no element of skill involved at all. But what you can do is you can touch them, you can interact with them, and you can do things. You can press buttons, pull levers, and the machines respond to you. Lights flash, they make noises, they kind of talk back to you in a reciprocal sort of way. So by interacting with the machine, there's a general feeling that maybe you have some control over it or you have some kind of relationship with it. And that kind of illusory feeling of control is a very powerful driver of behavior. It makes people think they can, if they were just a little bit quicker, better, thought a bit faster, they could influence the outcome of a game. So these games are designed through very clever algorithmic internal mechanisms to produce this. The other aspect, and probably the most important one, is the idea of the near miss. And you're probably all aware of it. It's the picture here, the three sevens, and it looks like you've almost won because you can see the row and you've almost hit the jackpot because that 7 is just slightly raised or lowered. Again, machines are calculated to produce this effect depending on whichever kind of sequence they're programmed to do, but very regularly, just enough to keep people hooked, just enough to keep them want to keep on trying. And the near-miss effect has been known about since the 70s, since the most sophisticated types of machines were designed. It's been refined more recently to be described as something called losses disguised as wins. And this is the point where machines respond by flashing lights and making the sound of money falling into, making the sound of coins falling into the tray. So players are surrounded by all of these effects, which has a very significant effect on how they continue to behave and what they try to do next. And it's a form of operant conditioning after the experiments of Skinner, who showed that randomness was actually a really effective way to get people to keep trying to do something. If you built unpredictability into a cycle, people were far more likely to keep engaging in that cycle because you have no control and there's no other form of hook to stop you. So behavior is repeated. He did his experiments with rats, but at one point he said that actually one of the best examples of operant conditioning is gambling games. So he recognized even then, even before these sophisticated designs, just how potent these things could be. So added to that, you've got a whole range of ergonomic features. This is something that Natasha Scholl has written about in her book called Addiction by Design. Things like buttons, so you don't have to insert money into machines, so you don't have to touch money or even think about it. It makes a seamless experience. Levers that are optimally placed, chairs that are just at the right height, armrests, so people literally don't have to leave their seat in front of a machine for hours. And there's lots of anecdotal stories, which are also true, of players usually in Las Vegas who won't leave their machine to eat, to drink, or even to go to the bathroom for hours. So these are designed to get people into what's known as the zone and extend time on device. It's the charming industry term for keeping people at their machine and just spending as much time on it as they possibly can until they've emptied all their winnings into it. So these are incredibly effective devices. They've been described as being like cash machines in reverse. People just sit there, put their money in and tend never to see it again. But they're very carefully curated. They're apparently simple, but actually not at all. And machines tend to be found in casinos, as you've probably noticed. And I'll just say a little bit about casinos because they are also a great idea a great manifestation of the ways that these features come together. They're particularly constructed in certain ways with visual perspectives and affective states that are created through things like architecture, lighting, sound, and smell. And these things are put together by designers in order to direct players through the casino in particular ways. You can maybe, you can read the top of the heading there, which says, "One casino to rule them all." And apart from the slightly worrying Teutonic overtones of that, what they mean by that, these insights are gleaned from the 888 Casino blog. They're quite open about the ways that they manipulate their products. They put this kind of thing online and in closed blogs. But what they do is they design one casino, but they segment or profile their customers so that each part of the casino will suit each type of demographic group who have got different types of different budgets and different motivations and different attitudes towards the games. So, for example, high rollers who might be quite willing and able to spend thousands will be directed towards table games, which are tucked away and a little bit more private around the sides. Hotel guests, on the other hand, don't want to be confronted with a maze. They just want to get to their room. So the path for them will be a little bit more directive with signposts towards the hotel, because these things are usually hotels as well. So it'll be a simpler, more straightforward platform for them. Whereas casual players, who are actually the cash cows of a lot of Las Vegas casinos, will be directed on this winding kind of route through the slot machines and into the areas of high churn slots. So one casino can do all these things through carefully placed machines, through the patterns on carpets, through lights, even odor. The casino industry have researched colour and light, but also smell to quite an impressive extent. And they found that older people actually tend to like the smell of talcum powder. How do you say that? Powder. Powder. They think the connection is through the fact that many of them are grandparents and they powder their grandchildren as babies. But whatever the reason, they like the smell. It makes them soothed, it makes them relax, and it makes them want to play more. So in certain areas of these casinos, that smell will be prevalent. So they've really thought of everything. And when I described this as the architecture of chance. What I was thinking of, obviously, was a play on the architecture of choice architecture, and the way that nudges and affordances are used to direct behaviour in particular ways. And I think machines and casinos are like a living example of this, and a very extreme form of choice architecture, so chance architecture. And this goes, I think, beyond nudges. I think we're into something a lot more directive, but I'll leave that for later. Oh, and this is just an illustration of the change in casino design over the last 20 years. Designers have found that this first design, the maze, which was the traditional casino design, where you went in and kind of got lost because there's no clocks, no natural light, and no obvious entrances and exits. This is less lucrative, actually, than the idea of a playground, which is more open, more welcoming, less oppressive, and more like somewhere where you can play in a luxurious and unrestrained environment. It's more about pleasure. So it's a slightly more sophisticated take on the motivations behind gamblers as customers, and it also results in a very different kind of design. You can see the big difference there. So this is an example of behavioural design in action. It's the architecture of design that encourages people to move in particular ways. But recently, and I think in the last 20 years or so, all of these trends have been intensified in a really extreme way through mobile and social technologies. And these are new forms of gambling that have really only, I guess they've only hit the gambling sphere probably in the last decade, a bit less, although they've been moving into the consumer industries in general for a lot longer than that. And these are things like, well, particularly trends in technology and also in marketing. The rise of smartphones, digital currencies, contactless payments, forms of marketing that use personalization and geolocation technologies, and also social media as a platform and social media marketing. And all of these things have opened up a whole new vista for the gambling industry. They make gambling a lot more intensive, a lot more immersive, a lot faster, and they also make it a lot more difficult to resist, I think. They embed it into everyday life in a way that it wasn't really, didn't really exist before. And as I say, as you can see from the picture there, the consumer industries in general have been onto this for quite a long time. Facebook and social media platforms and so on. So, yeah, the gambling industry has essentially moved into this space, and they've invested really heavily in mobile technologies and also in moving into social media platforms. So at the moment, the mobile gambling industry has a $100 billion per annum turnover, which is making it the fastest growing sector in the industry by quite some way. It's probably exceeded 100 billion since the start of the year. And it's increased both the speed and the reach of gambling, particularly gambling on mobile devices like smartphones, which makes it spreads it out into the world, and it gives it a completely different kind of, a completely different dynamic. Makes it a very different sort of thing. And I think these are turbocharged features that when you bring these sorts of technologies and these kinds of marketing directives into gambling, you make it a very different sort of product. So I'll spend a little bit of time outlining what this new kind of landscape looks like. And as I say, most of this comes from, most of this has been gleaned from grey literature, online sources, and internal industry documents and their marketing literature. So it's some of the language is quite chilling, and sometimes it tends to sound like a marketing seminar, but it's this information hasn't really percolated into academic or policy circles yet, although it will. But at the moment, this is the only place to find it. And this type of gambling phenomenon is largely off the radar, even among regulators. They're still looking at online games of chance, and this is very different. This takes it up exponentially. So the first thing to note, as these are marketing design consultants, Bullet Business, and they point out that the mobile platform is not just a small screen internet. Okay, is that better?
A bit closer to the microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I won't move. So is that okay? Okay, okay. I feel like I should start singing soon. Right, so it's... just be done with it.
Because then, I didn't tell her that we were going on stage, etc. So then she will complain with me.
Yeah, well, this is...
She said that she had to bring the guitar, so... Just a bit closer.
Yeah, okay. You're welcome. Okay, so it's the industry and the design consultants who advise them know that mobile and social gambling is a very different kind of thing, and this comment sums it up very well. It's not just a small screen internet. It's not just, this is very different to something you would do on your computer. It's entirely different. It's got different technologies for a start. Different types of games. The game designs are very different for mobile. They're much more immersive, much faster, and much more embedded in the other things that you've got on your phone. And they use different platforms and different interfaces. So this is a different technology, and that can't be emphasized enough. You need to forget about the internet when you think about mobile gambling. It's not the same thing. So the same marketing design consultants describe mobile gamblers as being like web players, but on fast forward. So obviously they're increased. And the reason for that is because they have their phone with them on average for 22 hours out of every day. And most people who use mobile gambling devices on their phone check their phone 200 times a day. So it's a significant engagement with a smartphone, which in itself is a very particular kind of technology. It's a key device, and as Steve Jobs of Apple knew, these are far more than just things. They're also affective, aesthetic products that people develop affective relationships with, emotional relationships with. So they're not just things, they're not just products, and phones, in fact, have been described as addictive products in their own right. So when you put gambling onto that, you've got a very intensified situation. It's like a perfect storm of design technology, really. And what they do, obviously, is they increase accessibility 100-fold, and also the speed of gambling is increased too. Researchers have called mobile phones as like having a casino in your pocket, which is true. And actually, even that's an underestimation, because I would say a mobile phone is like having a whole gambling ecosystem in your pocket, because you can actually bet on anything, not just casino games. It's beyond the casino. And the games that are embedded in mobile phones tend to be relayed through apps, which are designed specifically for the mobile interface. They use sophisticated graphics, interactive features. They often link up with other apps on your phone, so they have access to that kind of data within your own personal device. So they're actually quite sophisticated mediators of your particular your particular personal documentation, if you like. But they're also, the games are designed by designers who are particularly trained in mobile game development. And again, these are different to internet games. They're not the same things at all. And obviously accessibility is increased 1,000-fold. You can play when you're waiting for the bus, when you're in the shopping queue, when you're in a cafe waiting for a friend. You can, you know, a game is just really the press of a button, and it can take seconds. So it's ubiquitous, accessible, and very, very fast. And added to that, these are just the basic technology features. But added to that, these features are then driven by very sophisticated forms of marketing, which again are designed specifically for the gambling industry. And the industry have copied many of these features from more conventional consumer industries, but modified them to suit their own particular needs. So there's been a shift most significantly from content creation, which is basically the features of games, to player engagement and management, which is a very, well, engagement and management is very much about taking players in and then managing what they do once you've got them. Again, they're very upfront about the purpose of these things. This is DNA, Delta DNA, who are another design consultancy firm. The player tracking capacities in apps, which is where a lot of the big data is gleaned. It's, you know what geolocation is, I guess, when you track where, you track where people are depending on GPS. Well, it's that amasses vast amounts of data to collect personal information to get inside players' mindsets. So this is the idea of player engagement and management. It's about getting to know your customers so that you can then get into their heads and direct them from there. And to do that, personalized marketing is tailored by the use of information to then produce things like updates and special offers that are tailored to exactly that individual at exactly the right time when they're most conducive to particular offers. This is called predictive personalization, and it's based on someone's betting history and their preferences and the kind of things that data shows that they've done in the recent past with their gambling behavior. And as an example, this is an example of a push notification, this is a picture of my phone. I downloaded some apps just to see how they worked in real time. What a mistake that was. Never do it if you want to get rid of them, because they're impossible to get off your phone. Very easy to download, but really hard to get rid of. And what happened here was, this was 3D Roulette company. And what happened here was every time, once I put this thing on my phone, every time the phone was switched on, I got a notification just to tell me, don't forget to log in and play. Or sometimes it would be offers of free spins or bonuses or whatever. And this is before I'd logged in to my phone. This was just switching it on. So, I never took them up on their generous offers. And I guess in a way they probably didn't care too much, because the point was it was to make me think about gambling, which worked because every time I picked up my phone, there it was. So it was that little nudge every day. And this is bullet business again. And as they pointed out, stating what was probably quite obvious, reaching a customer on the device where they can instantly take action is a very powerful tool. And of course it is, because that is the device that I also would have gambled on. That's the device where the marketing comes, and all I needed to do was press a button, and that would have been it done. So this is a completely different kind of behavior. This isn't traditional gambling as you think of it. This is something quite a lot more sinister, I think, a lot more effective. And geolocation technology is kind of similar. It does the same sort of thing. It links player movements with their location in real time. So if you've got this switched on in your phone, which you will do if you have gambling apps, this just works out where you are. And then it targets promotions depending on whether you're near a particular terrestrial venue. So this is the link up between mobile and terrestrial gambling. So, for example, 888 Casino, who are an online firm, also have ownership of terrestrial casinos in Britain. It used to be Rank and Gala. So if and when you happen to be near a Rank or a Gala casino, they would tell you, they could helpfully tell you where it was and how to get there. And quite possibly that there'd be a bonus waiting for you when you went in. So, and this is, this is a technology that is used by more mainstream companies quite a lot, particularly Starbucks. I mean, they've got an app where you can buy coffee in advance. You just need to, you order it in advance, and then when you go past the shop, it's ready, waiting for you. So you don't have to spend that incredibly frustrating 5 minutes waiting in a queue for it. You might risk it being cold by the time you get there, but it's there. But this is something that gambling industry have imported from, they've learned from companies like Starbucks. And, well, I think it's one thing when it's coffee, but when it's products where you can potentially lose 10, hundreds, thousands of euros at a push of the button, it's a very different kind of thing. There's no regulation of any of this, in Britain at least. So, Casino Affiliate make the point that mobile gambling is opening up a whole world of opportunities for operators, and geolocation technology is making a lot of that magic happen. So this is one of their key marketing technologies, and it's a key aspect of design. It's a very powerful way of manipulating people's movement by giving them offers and nudges and making particular affordances more appealing than others. What else are they up to? Yes. The convergence between gambling and gaming. This is the final kind of new frontier for new forms of games. And what a lot of operators are doing is they're building up a social media presence. They're moving into online platforms like Facebook and Twitter, less successful in, what's the other one? Can't remember. Anyway, Facebook and Twitter are the two main areas where they're moving. And this is for two reasons, I think. One is to make their presence known. One is a kind of branding. It's to get the brand out there onto these incredibly popular platforms that have millions and millions of customers. And the other one is to develop their brand identity through harnessing the power of these social networks in a form of viral marketing. So, the way that viral marketing usually works is that consumers themselves are used as, they're used as agents of advertising, if you like. They become, it's a kind of word of mouth that's done online. So they've realized that naturally if you can gamble through forums like Facebook, then you can also not only gamble for games, but you can also build up a presence through things like likes and via Twitter, tweets, and so on. But you can get people talking about your product, and by talking about it and sharing and talking about bonuses and wins and losses and the excitement or all the general emotive things that go on, you can link into these vast social networks in a very natural, organic sort of way. This is free for them. They don't have to do very much at all because people actually do most of the work for them. So it costs very little to get onto these platforms, and once they're there, the rewards are exponential. Right, I wasn't quite expecting that to come up, never mind. Well, this is an example of a Twitter feed with the other Cristianos. That's an example. So in terms of Twitter, okay, companies, particularly Paddy Power, which is a British-Irish company, you've probably come across them, they are very good at moving into, they've got a huge Twitter presence. They've got millions of, well, not millions, they've got tens of thousands of followers on Twitter. And what they do is they use seeded conversations, which is where they'll use one of their representatives who's not an obvious representative of Paddy Power. Sometimes it's official and sometimes it isn't. So, I mean, Paddy Power has a logo and they tweet, but they also have people who work for them who just tweet as individuals. And you don't know that they work for Paddy Power, but they tweet on their behalf. So they just tweet like regular sports fans. The demographic is young, single men who like football, like sport, and who gamble a lot, who are also the demographic who gamble the most. So it's the ideal demographic. And Paddy Power have infiltrated themselves into Twitter really successfully by making seeded conversations, which is when you initiate a conversation on a particular topic, and then you let people carry it on, and then sometimes come back in to direct it in particular ways. So these look like organic conversations between followers, between football fans, but actually they are, but they're also not, because they're initiated by the company and they're guided by the company. Sometimes not, but it's very hard to see where the links are because it's so subtle, and it's such a natural, organic kind of process that it's quite difficult to see where the gaps are. And they base a lot of their appeal on humour and on knowing their demographic, on the 9 things that make Cristiano Ronaldo angry. They also try and do controversial campaigns because that also helps them. And it appeals to their demographic sense of edginess. So, but some of those examples are too X-rated to show before the watershed. So you can look them up though. Nearly finished. Yeah. Okay. Finally, last point is just about the ways that these things are monetized. Most of the games played on platforms like Facebook are free. They don't involve money because they're not allowed to involve money, except in Britain where they are, but elsewhere they're not. So they use things like virtual goods, things like skins, rewards, tokens. But the point is to try and monetize this behavior, to try and shift to real money through either moving to real money games, which you can do in Britain, or elsewhere in-game purchases where you're not actually gambling, but you're buying things, you're buying virtual goods with real money. So you're buying skins or tokens with real cash, even though they're not, the things that you're buying aren't worth anything in monetary terms. And this is the convergence between real money gambling and social gaming. And it blurs the boundaries of gambling and gaming and of value and of money and what isn't money. And it's a really difficult regulatory minefield, which is very convenient for the gambling industry because they get through the loophole here by making a lot of money on something that isn't technically gambling but is still very, very profitable. So this is their aim: build, grow, and monetize your games on the Facebook platform. And as a last final example, Candy Crush is a great example of this. Now, it's not a gambling game, as anyone who's played it probably knows, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything to play it, but it makes over $1 million a day in revenue every day. So it's incredibly lucrative, but it's free. You don't have to play. You don't have to pay to play it at all. The way it makes its money is through in-game purchases. That's why it's so lucrative. But then you look at these are tweets from Candy Crush players. And you look at these, and these read like it's a gambling game. And it's about gambling addiction. So the discourse here is not about gaming or games. It's actually about gambling and moreover, addiction. So, I'll let you read that yourself, but particularly, I won't leave the toilet until I complete a level of Candy Crush or run out of lives. And that's apart from being quite tragic, it's also a comment on the ubiquity of mobile, because, you know, whoever wrote that must be doing this on their mobile phone. So this is a great example of the convergence of mobile technologies, social platforms, technology, marketing, monetization, and the convergence of discourses of gambling with chance architectures, the ways that behavior is curated in particular ways. All of which is clearly a kind of, this is all very much an example of surveillance and control, I think, because all this liking and tweeting, all this social marketing and geolocation and personalization, all of this shapes behavior in particular ways, and it also embeds gambling in social networks in ways that increasingly normalize it. And in that, you've moved from what Bernays would have called the engineering of consent to ideas of continuous control, which is a lot more pervasive and a lot more effective. And I think it just makes you stop and think and remember that when the industry side affect nudges and affordances and utilize behavioral psychology, this is way beyond the nudge. This is more like an iron fist and a velvet glove. You know, this is a much more directive form of persuasion. So yeah, so I'll stop.
Thank you.
Thanks.